Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is Season 3, Episode 12. Today is Sunday, March the 20th, 2016. My name is Graham Perro. With me tonight, as usual, are Melissa Daphne and Tyler Fitch. We've got a couple of games to talk about. I guess there were 3 this past weekend. Some pretty interesting stuff going on in these games. But to start off with, let's talk about the Vancouver Stealth. Made a big coaching change this weekend. Dan Perreault was let go. Former Mammoth, former Rock, former Shamrocks, various other NLL teams. Coach Jamie Batley was hired as head coach. Jim Milligan also joins as an assistant coach. He was formerly an assistant coach in New England. And Caleb Toth has been sort of demoted to be an off-floor assistant. I don't know if they call that a demotion. But in any case, they've kind of shuffled stuff around. And Tyler, since you're the Stealth guy, I figured we'd get your take on that first.
Right. The move wasn't a surprise. Something had to change after the very subpar effort in Toronto, and it's easier to move one coach than it is 5, 10, 15 players. So they made a move. It was I think bringing in an Eastern coach to the BC team is interesting. Not always the first choice of people in the area. They really love their BC players, and they're very pro BC, and so now they have a non-BC coach, and I don't know how well that will be received in the lacrosse community, but at some point they just there wasn't a ton of them out there. He's got good experience. I guess he hasn't won a title in the NLL, but he's helped craft some good teams. He was a coach in Denver leading up to the season before they won their title in 2006. He's won multiple Man Cups in Peterborough, and I think he was probably a great coach to bring in mid-season. When you're in such a predicament, it was a good choice. Brought in one of his own assistants, which is great. He needs to not be worrying about adjusting to the players and the entire coaching staff if he didn't have to, so I guess he didn't. And just looking forward to seeing how this plays out the rest of the season. Interesting start for the first game. We'll cover that in a bit, but it was a move that Stealth had to make. The pool of candidates, I think they made a great choice. Somebody who can have some fire and passion and get them going early in games, which was a key factor in a lot of their games, slow starts. So yeah, Melissa, he was your coach in Denver there for a few years with the Mammoth. Do you have any good Jamie Batley memories?
I remember him being a very fiery, passionate, likes to yell type of guy. So I think long term that may not be the best coaching style, but for right now with the Stealth, they need somebody to light a fire under them, and maybe Dan Perreault wasn't the right person right now. So I think Batley, like you said, was a good choice. He's definitely a very different style, and they need something to shake him up. Something is not working, they need to change. And if they would have gone with a similar, maybe even a similar BC coach, they had to change something. So bringing someone with a very different style, I think, is gonna be a better option than some of the other coaches that they might have gone with. So I think having somebody like Batley who isn't afraid to shake it up is definitely going to be a lot better. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Okay, so we'll move on to our first game. We'll get back to the Stealth in a few minutes for Game 3 this weekend, which was obviously an interesting one, but we'll get to that. The first one I don't have an awful lot to say about. Rochester 11, Georgia 4. Again, we talked about this, I think, last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, how there's been a number of games in the past couple of years where a team's held to like 5, 6 or fewer goals kind of thing, 3 goals, 4 goals. And Rochester's been on the winning end of several of them and the losing end of 1 or 2 as well. So it seems odd that Rochester seems to be included in all of these low-scoring games. I all I have to say about this one is the Swarm. I was about to say the Stealth. The Swarm had nothing. They couldn't solve the Rochester defense. They couldn't solve Matt Vince. Um, I was only able to watch the first quarter of this game, and even that I couldn't really see much of it because the feed dropped about every minute, minute and a half kind of thing. I couldn't watch it for. I don't think I watched it for 2 minutes straight at any point because the feed would just keep dropping, and it got to the point where it was unwatchable. So I only watched the first quarter. I saw some other people having some issues. I think Tyler, you said that the Android app or the iOS app or something was working much better, but that app is not available in Canada. They have part of the deal with the NLL is for the Canadian viewers, you can only watch it with your standard web browser. Trying to watch it through the Fox Sports Go app is not available. So I was out of luck. So did either of you guys see this game? Tyler, just start with you.
Yeah. So the game started 4:30 here on the West Coast, and I was still working, so I was at my desk watching in the browser, and it sucked like you. Like just in the national anthem, I had 2 drops, so it was not good. And then you tweeted about the same time. I was like, oh, well, I'm gonna move downstairs in a minute anyway, so I'll just fire up on my iPad now before I. And then I push up to the TV when I do that, and it works out nicely. And as soon as I switched over, I was like, I wasn't having the drops anymore. So it's weird to me how the browser, which can be pretty resilient and run more things than just an app, handles the connections worse. Worse than the iOS app does. I haven't used it on Android to compare, but that difference alone was odd. I guess they need to take whatever logic they have on their app and build it in the web browser and make that be more rock solid, because it's just an absolutely terrible experience for the fans. It's not good. As for the game, 4 goals. That was I forgot how bad that was after the Stealth game. But yeah, Rochester's defense, Matt Vince, they were what we expect out of them. And again, it seems to be a slow starting. Like January and February don't matter, but come March, April, May, they're gonna take people out, do it their way, and we see it again here. Very good performance by the Nighthawks, but I can't remember too much of it because everything became a blur last night. Any thoughts here, Melissa?
I'm just amazed by the 4 goals. I just anytime you get such a low-scoring game, and it's interesting that they scored them in both of the odd quarters, so 2 and 2. It's just wow. I don't know if Vince was on fire or if Georgia just really wasn't clicking. It's anytime you see a team score under 5, that's just weird in this sport. So yeah, I don't have much else to add. I'm speechless.
The stat sheet is pretty wild to look at for the Swarm. Chad Tutton scored 2 goals, the transition guy. Joel White scored a goal, another transition guy. So the only forward that scored a goal was it.
Yeah, he picked a pass off out of the air and just went the length of the floor, and shot it. It was beautiful, like individual effort all the way down. He did a great job. Sorry, I just of the 4 goals, that one really stuck out to me.
Well, if there's only 4 of them, it's easier to remember. If there's a whole bunch, they tend to blur together. But Randy Stotts had nothing. Miles Thompson had nothing. Well, in terms of goals, Stotts had 2 assists. Miles Thompson had an assist. Jesse King had an assist. Jordan McIntosh had nothing. Shane Jackson had nothing. Johnny Powless had nothing. This is really weird for the Swarm. This is a dynamic, high-scoring team. They don't win all their games necessarily, but they're certainly a high-scoring team. So keep all those guys to nothing is pretty impressive. So good job for the Nighthawks. Yeah, so I guess we'll move on to the second game, which I didn't see at all because it was on TSN Go. Calgary 13, Colorado 9. I did look over the stats this morning. Where did it go? Here's this. And it looks like it was a close game. most of the way through up until the Roughnecks scored 5 straight at the end of the third and beginning of the fourth to take a 5-goal lead, and that pretty much did it. Yeah, so like I said, I didn't see this one. There was only 5 penalties in the entire game, and 3 of them were illegal substitution. So not exactly the chippy kind of game that we might see between these two teams. So that's a little unusual. Melissa, did you see this one?
Yeah, like you said, this one, whenever you get these two teams together, it usually is very chippy. It's very close. It's just hard hitting. There's just a fire under both teams. And it just seemed, there was a lot of back and forth for the first 3 quarters, but it almost seemed like the Mammoth peaked too early. They started off really strong, and then they kind of lost their momentum and just never gained ground. And then the fourth quarter hit, and it was just all Calgary. It was like a very different team. Adam Jones' streak got broke, which they were talking about until the last seconds of the game because he just couldn't seem to find the net. And it's like he was taking lots of shots, but he wasn't getting them past him. I thought it was interesting we had Bouquet instead of Ward starting in this one, although we did end up with Ward. Let's see. Yeah, Adam Jones didn't even have any assists, so that's kind of crazy, and he had 11 shots on goal that were tallied. So he definitely was having an off night. I don't know if maybe just the Mammoth in general were having an off night, because it wasn't that you could say that they were playing poorly, and you couldn't really say that Calgary was playing great, but Calgary was definitely just a couple steps ahead of the Mammoth most of the second half. They just definitely had something a little more solid together, whereas the Mammoths were just falling off. So it was interesting. I think since this is such a big rivalry, and of course, if the Mammoths would have won, then they would have already clinched a berth. So, you have to start wondering, okay, is this just a fluke, or did they peak too early in the season, and now we're getting into the calf, and we see a lot of changes. So, well, it'll be interesting. This one, in my gut, I kind of felt Calgary was going to win, but I chose Colorado because, when you look at everything else, Colorado's doing so well lately. So hopefully, as a Mammoth fan, this is going to, light that fire that they need to kind of keep going. But I won't deny that this also has me a little concerned. Did you see this one, Tyler?
Yeah, I watched the first half leading into the Stealth game, and then came back and watched the second half this afternoon, and it was a very good game. 5-5 at the half, very close battle. The second half explosion by really third quarter explosion by the offensive explosion by the Roughnecks put it away. The last minute, Adam Jones is just taking shots, and he trying to hey, I haven't scored a goal. It's a team game, but I have a great individual stat. I'm going to try and keep going right now. But yeah, Mike Poulin stopped him. He's got to feel great. He is totally returned to the Poulin Wall status that he's had in the past. I don't know. Last year he didn't have it for whatever reason, but he's come back this year, re-engaged, and is playing as well as anybody I've seen in the league, really. Goalie can be a very finicky spot to play in and have to have your head straight. But he's got it right now, and I don't know. Hasn't won a ton of stuff in the NLL. Doesn't always come up in discussions with Vince and Bold or even Cosmo. But when he's on, he's a great goalie, and he's on right now. So they're going to start rising through the West and have some. We'll see how they do in the next couple games and see if they stick with him. That's my thoughts there. How about you, Graham?
Yeah, Mike Poulin was certainly one of the top goalies 4 or 5 years ago. I think he won goalie of the year, and then he dropped a little bit. I mean, you can't keep that level up unless you're Matt Vince for a number of seasons. But he was still the main guy in Calgary, and Chiliana was the backup. until last year when, like you said, Tyler, Pula just didn't seem to have it, and they brought in Chiliano a couple times. He played well. They gave him the starting role, and he ran with it. And then this year seemed to start off with Chiliano as the main guy and Poulin as the backup. And same sort of thing happened, but in reverse. So now Poulin's back, playing really well. I think they still have a lot of confidence in Chiliano to come in as a backup, but Poulin seems to be the guy right now, so good job for him. And our third game of the evening. What a game this was. I was able to see this one. Feed only dropped a handful of times, so I was good with it. And wow, was it entertaining. Saskatchewan 24, Vancouver 16. The NLL tweeted this was the highest scoring game since 2007 in the NLL. It looked like it might have been even more because there were 24 goals scored in the first half. 24-25 is around the average for your typical game. So Saskatchewan was kind of, I wouldn't say they were dominating the game for the first three quarters. They had the lead. They kept the lead for most of it. Vancouver did tie it up midway through the first, and then again at the end of the third, thanks to a sort of a four-goal run in well, I guess it was about 7 minutes. And they managed to keep Saskatchewan off the board for that whole time. But it looked like Saskatchewan was trying to run away with it, but Vancouver just wouldn't let them. They just kept in it. They were still back by 2 or 3 for most of the first three quarters until they poured it on at the end of the third. And all this without Garrett Billings and without Logan Chess. So it's kind of unfortunate debut for Jamie Batley as the coach. Said, here's the team that we need you to bring back from the brink of playoff elimination. We're not playing well, so you need to turn it around. Oh, and by the way, in your first game, we're going to take out 2 of your top 3 offensive guys. Hope that's okay. So, yeah, first 3 quarters were pretty close, and then the fourth quarter hit, and all hell broke loose. Tyler, I'll let you take over from there.
Yeah, let's see. 3 goals in the first 2 minutes and 23 seconds for the Rush, probably on 3, maybe 4 shots. It was just goal, 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 guys wide open on the crease. Absolutely horrific start, but the Stealth answered back with 2 more in about a minute. So Rush get 1 more, Stealth get another, 2, 3. By the time we hit the first TV timeout, roughly, I think the score was like 5-4 maybe. So I thought the Stealth were done in the water 3-0 2, 3 minutes in, but they battled back. It was 15-15 late in the third. So they tied the game up even though they were down 14-10 at the half. Again, 4-goal deficit's not definitely something that can be overcome, but they did it too early. It's frequently a tough battle for teams when they're down in a big hole. They'll come in and they'll battle, and they'll get up to the point where they can tie it, and then they kind of run out of energy, and the team will get a couple more. But usually that happens with like 2 minutes left in the game or 3 minutes left in the game. They had a whole quarter left. And whatever the adjustment was in the fourth quarter that Derek Keenan made for that Rush squad, it was absolutely perfect. Because they went from being a 16-15 game to, after a minute, we got minute 14, minute 21, so 7 seconds later, minute 33, so 12 seconds later, 3 goals by the Rush, and all of a sudden it was 19-15, down by 4 again. And another goal a minute and a half after that, another goal 30 seconds after that. It was lights out. So the 8-1 score in the fourth quarter was really a 9-1 run to finish the game. Stealth scored 1 goal in the last 20 minutes of the game. Don't know how they collapsed at the end there. That was major downer. I was super psyched when it was 15-15. It felt so good. Like, they're not quitting. They were able to battle back, and then it just imploded. Stealth had a stupid penalty from Matt Beers. I think it was not around then, but it was. No, his was in the fourth quarter. But when the Stealth could have had a paddle, but they lost it. And so some things improved. 16 goals. I mean, 16 goals in any game, you're like, that's a good effort. Two or three leading scorers or producers or quarterbacks, leaders of the offense were out. They still put up 16, which is just incredible. They still lost by 8. That is just bonkers. Never seen them play that bad. They've never played a game that bad. I think you put out the stat that was their worst single game goals allowed. So I've been following the team a long time. I didn't see any of the all 24 goals in a game. That was bad. But I think there's some signs there. The 16 goals and the effort by the offense that they definitely improved from where they had been a few weeks before. But defensively, they failed. I don't know, collapsed, failure, whatever you want to say. I've never seen it that bad. So whatever changes will happen this week will probably be on that side of the ball. What are your thoughts here, Melissa?
This is one of those scores that makes you just go, what in the world was going on? I mean, watching the Calgary game, they were announcing the score during it, and it was just really crazy to hear these scores that sound like final scores. And no, there's 10 minutes left in the second quarter, and it's just crazy. I mean, one of the teams scored more goals than are in some games. So it was just one of those things. It makes you wonder what's going on with the goalies and the defense. You know, is the offense really just so much on fire that the goalies and defense can't stop them, or did the defenses just crumble? So it's, this is just one of those ones that makes you go, what in the world? Probably going to play a little havoc with Graham's Moneyballer column this weekend, too. So, yeah, unfortunately, I didn't see this one, but it's just one of those ones that's just crazy. I kind of want to see it just to see what was going on, because to have 40 goals in a game is just nuts. So, did you see this one? Do you have anything to add, Graham, besides with your Moneyballer?
I guess I did want to say, or I wanted to ask Tyler specifically, since he probably saw these plays. At the end of the third quarter, there was I guess that's the question: was there a goal scored or not? A shot came in against Bold. I think it was Bold. Might have been Carlson at the time, and it looked like it bounced off him, rolled toward the net, and then a rush defender dove in and swept it out. And from the overhead shot, it was kind of inconclusive, but it looks like it didn't quite cross the line. And then they showed it from another angle, which looked like it actually crossed the line, got sort of in the corner, and that was swept out. And the first one looked like it was inconclusive. The second one looked a little more like that was actually a good goal. And as they were showing it on the broadcast, they showed that second view, and I sort of went, oh, that might actually count as a goal. And just after they showed that, the ref came out and said, nope, no goal. So it almost looked like he didn't see that extra view. Jake Elliott was not thrilled about that at all. What did you think?
So, the first few, like when it happened live, that shot you're talking about, and the overhead angle, it looked like the player diving back clamped the ball and stopped it from crossing the line. But then they, as you said, they come with this magical third angle all of a sudden, and the guy batted at it and hit it towards the pipe and basically stopped it. Unfortunately, I'm married to a lawyer, and I got to say that angle had no clear evidence that the ball crossed the line. But then when you watch the overhead, looking for that, you can almost see it. Like when I was watching the overhead, I was just like, oh, you just see the guy clamp it. You don't see the ball cross. But then you're like, oh, the ball's loose up there above his stick, and it's harder to watch. It was close, but it wasn't clearly all the way across the line. It may have been 90% over the line. It was really close, but there was no clear evidence. So yeah, it was a heartbreaker because that would have been tied 16-16, and instead the South like, oh, the refs screwed us, and that may have been part of the deflation. And then they called a goal at the other end immediately afterwards. That wasn't a goal, and the South had to challenge that to because time was expiring, and ball was flying in empty net, and the clock hit. Luckily, you could clearly see the clock hit 0-0 as the ball hit the crease line. It was just that close. It was fractions of a second from scoring. That would have been 17-15, but still, both those sequences took the some momentum away from the Stealth, and some of the heart, I think, came out of them as well. So that was a downer to have those calls go against them. But even as a diehard Stealth fan, I don't think the evidence was crystal clear that it was a goal, but it sure could have been. If they had called it a goal, I don't think the evidence would have been there to overturn it if they had seen that last angle. I don't know. It sucked. Because that was right at the breaking point for the whole game. It was actually pretty key. Thanks for the reminder there that they were tied. Okay, only down by one. Would have been tied again, but it all slipped away there in that fourth, coming out of that sequence.
Yeah, I thought Jake Elliott was going to get himself fired with some of the comments that he was holding himself back from making. Because, like you said, instead of being 16-16, it looked like it was going to be 17-15 with the goal that they called at the very end.
Yeah, he went full on homer mode there.
And then they showed the replay of the other goal, and you could clearly see the clock was 0 before the ball went in the net. It wasn't even close. The first one, like you said, you could kind of see where if they had called it a goal, yeah, okay, maybe that third angle was enough to convince them that it was a goal. But if they didn't call it a goal, I wouldn't call that rock hard evidence that it did go in. It looked like it did, but you can kind of see it both ways. The second goal was just not a goal at all. So I'm glad they did call that back. I thought it was weird because I didn't realize that they had changed the rules on challenges, because at one point, and it might even have been this year that they changed it, you got one challenge per half. And I think when they decided to add a third challenge, if you got the first two right, they decided to make it you get 2 challenges per game rather than 1 per half. So if the Stealth had used their challenge on the previous non-goal call, which they ended up calling not a goal, then they immediately challenged the next one. Well, if you only get 1 per half, they shouldn't have been able to challenge that second one. But it turns out, as Teddy Jeter pointed out, they did change the rule, so you get 2 per game. So the Stealth were kind of lucky there in that it was quite obviously not a goal, but if they didn't have enough challenges to actually challenge the goal, it probably would have stayed. So, yeah, that was a bit weird. Now that said, it was a big turning point, or it could have been a big turning point, but then the Stealth managed to allow 8 more goals after that. So it's kind of hard to say if that didn't happen, the Stealth would have won the game. But it would have been a different situation after that anyway, if those calls had gone the other way. Okay, I guess that's it for that game. And Melissa, you wanted to talk about jersey retirements. What do you think?
Well, hopefully we'll have a good discussion with this. It's one of those things this season. I've actually had quite a few conversations with some other fans about this, and I've found it very interesting. So I thought opening it to an even broader audience might be more fun. Obviously, John Gallant retired this season from the Mammoth, and there's a lot of discussion on whether or not his jersey should be retired. And nothing's been announced, so it's starting to look like it isn't going to be retired. And so there's discussion on, why should he be retired? Why shouldn't it be retired? And then usually, because it's kind of hard not to within the Mammoth, John Grant Jr.'s name obviously comes up a lot because he is one of the top players. However, when it comes to the Mammoth, he really hasn't done anything for us. So for the Mammoth, should he have his number retired? There's a lot more room, I think, for discussion there. But when you look at what he did for Rochester, there's no doubt you could see it being raised in their rafters. So it's kind of that big discussion on, what kind of things should make a player's jersey be retired. Obviously, you can't do it for everyone, otherwise you're going to start running out of numbers and it's not going to be as special. But when you look at a defender who was on the all-decade team, and the only player that was on the Mammoth all-decade team that was still currently playing when he was named to that team, he was a captain. He was on the 2006 team, and he's been really instrumental in growing the game of lacrosse, and he's a leader on the field and off the field. I do see John Glant deserving that honor. He's the only player who has played 14 years for the Mammoth. No other player can say that, and it might be sometime before anyone can. So I think it is kind of a huge deal. But it's also, when you look at why some players do, I mean, Ray Bork hangs in the Pepsi Center rafters, and I know a lot of Avalanche fans that actually were upset over that, because therein again, he didn't really do much for the Avs. He was on that winning team, and there's a whole lot more that it's probably a different podcast, but it was a huge honor for them to do it, and it was retired for his previous team too. So it was a big deal, and when you know his story, it definitely kind of brings a power to it. But you can also see where a lot of Avalanche fans come from, that he didn't really do a whole lot for the team. It was just that 1 year. So, I guess, Tyler, do you have anything to add before we I keep going? I could probably talk for a while.
Yeah, the criteria for putting your jersey up it should be high. But somebody like Gallant, who was the captain of the team for a number of years, was there the whole length of the team's existence until he retired, that would meet my high standards of qualification. If I compare it to like the Stealth, there's probably been 3 players that are worth retiring their numbers. In my mind, that would be, I want to say, Jeff Zwicky, Reese, who isn't even close to done yet, and blanking on the third. Who was I thinking of? Eric Martin comes to mind. Played his whole career with the Stealth, won a title there. For a couple of years, he was an elite defender in the league. I think that should be what it is. Definitely a very minimal set of people should be getting this, not just because you played there a long time, but you got to be good too. Lewis Ratcliffe scored a ton of goals with the Stealth. He was on the tile team, but he played a bunch of other places. He was only with the Stealth for 3 or 4 years. That shouldn't be enough in my mind. Colin Doyle was there for 3 years. I think he has a single season scoring record for the team still, maybe, or Reese beat it last year by 1, but he was in the scoring records for the Stealth after only 3 seasons of play. Just because he's the top statistically doesn't mean he's a player. He should have his number up there at all. So in one sense, I agree that it should be a limited sense, and I think that I also agree that Gallant would meet that standard for the Mammoth. So it's a very odd choice. But they don't have to retire it this year. I mean, the guy's been out of the league for 12 weeks now. I mean, we're 12 weeks into this season, so he hasn't been gone that long. And I don't think a player should necessarily have his number retired immediately. We'll have to stealthy retire Richard's number at the start of the season because he said it was retired, and then be like, oopsie daisy. A little bit harder for somebody who's upper 30s to come back on the field as a defender in this league, but he should be up there at some point. And maybe it takes a season. I don't remember, did they retire Langtrees immediately? I think they probably did like halfway through that next season.
Langtrees, it wasn't retired like immediately at the home opener, but it was announced that it would be retired that season. Gates was announced pretty quick. Prout actually was a couple years after, and that was probably because one of the things that I know Graham and I have talked about a few times, there was a lot more things off the floor maybe going on with whether or not his was going to be retired or not, and so his was after. But typically it seems like it's been the same season the retirement's been announced. But going back to your, it's in the rafters, well, Gary Gate came back and played for Rochester. So, there was actually some fans demanding that his jersey should come down because he actually wasn't retired. So whatever you want to add to that.
Nothing more really for me other than it should be a select few. Gallant is that level. It's hard for a defender to get recognition because they don't just have all the stats. But the guy was a captain, did it for years on end. It's a great player. Graham, you've been silent so far. I don't want to ace you out here. What do you got?
Um, One thing I wanted to mention just about Gates' unretirement. The NHL had a similar situation when Mario Lemieux retired quite early. They waived the normal waiting period to put him into the Hall of Fame. So he actually went into the Hockey Hall of Fame and then unretired. So he played a number of years as an active player while in the Hall of Fame, which was a little weird. I remember hearing that from any other sport, though. I imagine Gary Gait probably was in the Hall of Fame by the time he played with Rochester again, because he was off for a couple of years. Um, I would agree with both of you. John Gallant certainly meets the criteria of having played for the team long enough, played well long enough, made a difference, led them to a championship. I don't know if you want to say led them to a championship. He was the captain at the time. Um, and like you said, it's harder to quantify how much a defender means to a team because you don't have the stats. But um, Gallant played at a high enough level for long enough for the Mammoth and made a difference in the community that he should meet that criteria. Um, I know more about the Rock than anybody else, so I'll go there. Um, the only Rock player who's had his jersey retired is Bob Watson. And when you think of how long Jim Veltman was the captain of the Rock from '99 until he retired in 2008, he led them to 5 championships. And he won the MVP award in that time. He was the face of the team. He did all kinds of stuff off the floor. He became a coach for the team shortly after he retired, though that only lasted half a season. There's no question his number should be in the rafters right next to Watson's, but it's not.
What
And
would
there's
Brett
been a
Hickey
lot of
do
talk
then?
as to why. Sorry?
I said, well, what would Brett Hickey do then?
Yeah, I guess
Didn't
they'd
Veltman
have
wear
to adjust
11?
that.
That's a joke, but yeah, I would have guessed 100% that Veltman had his jersey retired. I mean, greatest loose ball guy ever, captain 5 times. That's ridiculous that it's not.
Now, I know that there has been some bad blood. I don't know all the details. There's some sort of bad blood between Veltman and Jamie Dowick. Uh, I think now seems kind of weird because Veltman retired in, I believe, 2008, and Dowick didn't buy the team until 2010. But there was some issue there between the two of them, and I think that may have something to do with it. At the same time, he's been retired long enough that whatever bad blood is there should really have been swept away by this point. And honestly, I think he should be honored. There's a few others. I mean, I'm sure Josh Sanderson will probably have his number retired by The Rock as well once he retires. I can see them doing it for Blaine Manning as well. So there's a few there. Other than Watson, The Rock have done nothing about any of these guys. So it seems kind of strange that that they just haven't gone there. Now, the Toronto Maple Leafs have a policy now where they don't retire numbers. They've got 2 players that they've actually retired the numbers of, so nobody will ever wear those numbers again. But they've got another 15, maybe not that many, 12 banners hanging in the ACC. And if you look up, there's just a big long line of them, of all these players that have what they just say these players have been honored. So they have a banner up, they have a picture of them, they have their number up, but they don't actually retire the number. So other people can wear 27 even though Daryl Sittler's hanging up there. So I don't know if the Rock are planning to do something like that, but if they're planning it, they haven't done it. So yeah, it does seem weird that there's a lot of players who are, in our opinion anyway, worthy of this kind of honor and haven't been shown it. One question I have for you, Melissa, and this is not to say that I disagree with you, but when you say John Grant hasn't done anything for the team. The fact that you guys haven't won the championship while he's been on the team, is that the criteria?
That's not the only criteria. I definitely think that is a big factor because if you're the leader of the team and you're not half the time you're not even making it to the playoffs, and when you have made it to the playoffs, you're knocked out first round. I think that is a factor. But it's also when you do look back on what he did as a Nighthawk. Yeah, he has a lot of records. There's no doubt he's one of the top players that's ever played the game. He should definitely be in the Hall of Fame. But most of that was accomplished before he came to Denver. So in Denver, yeah, he's broken a couple more records, but he was almost to those records. It's not like he really just came to Denver and all of a sudden had a phenomenal season and just skyrocketed. I just also don't see him as the leader that he should be. I think for me, leadership is a big part of why a number should be retired. There's no doubt when you look at Prout or Langtree or Gary Gait, they were huge leaders on the floor and off, not to mention talented players. So to me, it's more than just talent because there's tons of talent in the league. There's no doubt about that some of these guys are just phenomenal. But is that really enough? Is having some records to your name really enough? To me, it's not. I feel like there should be another level. So, I think it's great that Bob Watson was retired. He was one of the nicest players I think I've met. I know when I got to talk to him, it was weird because it seemed like he was more excited to talk to me as a fan than I was to talk to one of the best goalies I've ever seen play. So that was the kind of person he was. So when you see players like that being honored, it makes sense. And as we've already discussed with defensive players, it is harder to get that recognition because you don't have the stats to go with it. And Glenn, I think, is a perfect example of that. And it's funny because a lot of people I've talked to, over the years kind of have that same thing. Gallant was one of those players that you didn't really notice. But once you did notice him, all of a sudden you saw him everywhere. It was just, you really saw the impact he had all over the field. And it's not like he's a big guy. I mean, he's only, I think, 5'10", 5'11". I mean, maybe even 6 foot. He's a smaller guy when you look at a lot of lacrosse players, especially for a defender. He's small. And so the impact that he had was just amazing. He was just all over the place making plays. And, Prout was our captain during the championship. And, he was definitely a phenomenal leader and great player. So you can see why he was retired. But for a defender to be recognized in all these other ways and not this big one, to me, it seems weird. But for me, it definitely is more criteria than just records. I think it's what kind of a person you are on the floor and off the floor, what kind of a leader you are. What did you do to help grow the sport, help grow the team? And unfortunately, I just don't see that as much from John Grant Jr. It's very much John Grant Jr. and then there's the team. And maybe that's just perception from the outside since he came in and he was already a big player. But when you saw Gary Gait off the floor, he just had a different way about him. He definitely took time for fans, especially young fans. And you can see that, he really wanted to grow the sport, wanted it to be successful. So for him, it seemed like the records were just kind of icing on the cake. For him, it was more about the sport, and maybe that's the difference. So for me, yeah, I think John Grant Jr., most of what he's accomplished wasn't here. And so I'm sure his number is going to be retired. That's just the way it is since he's one of the top players. But I just don't know that, in my mind, that he fully deserves that honor in Denver. So
If you look at his numbers, he did have the one season in 2012 where he scored 116 points in 14 games, which by itself is just phenomenal. And that record stood up until last year when Sean Evans blew it away. But again, Evans blew it away in 18 games rather than 14. But the other 4 seasons he's had in Colorado have been 91 points or 83. He had 91 points 3 times from 2013 to 2015. He had the same. And then 2013 and 2011. Sorry, 83 points in 2011. With the Nighthawks, he broke the 91-point barrier 6 times. So you're kind of right. Other than that one season that was outstanding, he's had 4 very good seasons in Colorado, but not to the same extent as he was in Rochester. Now maybe that's because he's getting old. He's spreading the ball around a little more. It's not always him that has to do all the work, but that was really never the case in Rochester. Anyway, he had Sean Williams and he had Sean Evans and he had a bunch of guys to pass to as well. Excuse me. Yeah, so interesting discussion. Hopefully we'll hear something from the Mammoth soon where they've changed their mind and John Gallant's number will go to the rafters.
Well, and do we even know what the other teams have done as far as retirement? I mean, obviously we know JT just got retired in Buffalo, but do we even know who else has been retired around the league?
As I said, in Toronto, it's only been Watson. I believe in Buffalo, they've also done Rich Kilgore and 1 or 2 older players from like the earlier mid '90s that I don't even remember.
Yeah. The Calgary, they do Forever Roughneck.
There's only Caleb Toth, as far as I know, isn't it?
I think Scotty Ranger got put in last year.
And Bride will probably go in at some point soon as well.
Yes. But that's their thing there. Stealth, they haven't retired anybody's, but this season, for the first time, they've been recognizing some players with little 1-minute highlight videos at a quarter break. So they've done Jeff Zwicky, Eric Martin, Cam Sedgwick. Haven't seen any others. Sedgwick will probably potentially retire his number for the Stealth. He was an assistant captain, never the captain, but not the leading scorer. But I don't know. He's kind of like Gallant, very rock solid, but he's a forward, so you kind of like, where's his numbers? It's like, no, he just put him in there. He never makes a mistake. That's what he got out of him. But so yeah, nobody's retired for the Stealth, but they got to be getting close to that. I don't think the Rush have done anything either. They're Quinlan, maybe. He's the only person that's been there the whole time, made an impact. But then they moved, so that skews stuff again because no Saskatchewan players made a difference yet. We'll see how they play out.
I just looked online, and the Bandits have also retired Darius Kilgore's number, which I probably should have remembered. They've also retired 2 other people who didn't play with the Bandits, and I guess this is part of their sort of community outreach kind of deal. Their former equipment manager, a guy named John Craig. They don't have a number listed for him because he never played, but I guess it just says retired by the Bandits. And then the number 34 was retired for a guy named Thomas Gardner, who was a Western New York youth lacrosse organizer. So I guess as a community, they decided to retire his number or a number in honor of him. So that's actually kind of a cool thing that the Bandits have done. But in terms of players, it's Darius Kilgore, Rich Kilgore, and Johnny T. I don't know about the Nighthawks. I don't know about if the Philadelphia Wings ever retired anybody's number. They certainly have a number to choose from. And I don't imagine the Minnesota Swarm ever retired anybody because they never had anybody around long enough to do that.
Ooh, sick burn.
I think Gary Gate might have been retired. His 22 might have been retired in Rochester, but I'm not 100% on that.
That would not be surprising, actually, no. All right, we can move on to our predictions for last week. Always my favorite section of the show. I've had 1 week of the 12 so far where I was above 500, and this was not it. So Melissa and I went 1 and 2 this past week, getting the Rush right and the other 2 wrong. Tyler had his picks completely the opposite of ours, so he obviously went 2 and 1. So nice job, Tyler. That brings the current standings to 19-29 for me, which is odd. I don't know if that's odd, but a couple of years ago I had an outstanding record. I think I ended up the season 8 or 10 games above 500, and this year I'm 10 games below 500, and we're only halfway through. So not so good for me. Tyler is just under 500 at 23 and 25, and Melissa is bang on 500 at 24 and 24. So as per usual, Melissa, you get to go first. We have a lot of games this week too.
Yeah, we do. And it was really hard to pick this week because these teams have been all over the place and we have a lot of barn to barns, and it's just, I think this week it's going to be kind of crazy, which is interesting because I think it's also Easter weekend. For Rochester, New England, I'm going to go with New England. I will admit I'm not very confident in that choice, but I'm not very confident going with Rochester either. Vancouver and Buffalo, the way Vancouver's playing, sorry, Tyler, they're too unpredictable right now. So we're going to go with Buffalo there. Calgary and Georgia, we're going to go with Calgary. A 4-goal game really doesn't give me much confidence right now in Georgia. Hopefully they'll shake that off. It may have just been a bad night. Now, with the Rush and Toronto, that was a tougher choice because we have seen Toronto playing much better. But I think I'm going to go with Rush. And New England and Rochester, we're going to go with New England to sweep, which was a difficult choice. And therein again, I'm not very confident with either team. So I can see either of those games going either way. Calgary and Colorado, I think this weekend is just going to have lit a fire under Colorado. Maybe they didn't expect Calgary to play as well as they did. I don't know. But I think I'm going to go with Colorado. And then with the Rush and the Rock again, I'm going to go with the Rush. So what about you, Tyler?
Alrighty, a few different picks here. Rochester at New England. I'm going to pick Rochester to ride their hot game and good defense from last week to get the win to start off. New England's coming off a bye, so they won't be as sharp, I think. Then Vancouver at Buffalo. Vancouver traveling cross country. Porous defense. I think Buffalo, they took it to the Stealth a couple weeks ago. No reason to fear them now, and they'll do it again. Is what I expect to happen. Georgia at Calgary. It's a long way for Georgia. I mean, for Calgary to travel to get all the way down to Georgia, I think it'll be a little rough on them. So I'm picking the Swarm to recover from that poor outing and get the win there. Rush going to Toronto. I'm picking Toronto to get that one. They've been looking pretty good lately. They had a little hiccup against the Roughnecks, but then they came back and beat the Stealth right away. And the Roughnecks are looking sharp coming after that with Dane Dovey back. So I don't think that loss to the Roughnecks is too much of a problem. I think they can steal one away from the Rush, who will be maybe a little complacent after scoring 24. New England at Rochester. I'm having New England win this one, so the road team is winning both games in my mind. I don't know why, but that's how it came across that it's going to happen. Calgary at Colorado. So Calgary goes to Georgia and then has to come back halfway across the country to Colorado. That'll wear them down. So
And high altitude.
yeah. So Calgary's going from from a big win against Colorado to having a losing weekend in my mind. And finally, Rush and Toronto finished their home and home in Saskatchewan or Saskatoon. And I'm picking the Rush to win that one. So I have the home teams winning that series, the road teams winning the New England and Rochester series. And just, I don't know. That's the feeling I have for this coming weekend. How about you, Graham?
All right. Let's take a look. Rochester, New England, play a home and home, and I'm going to go opposite of Tyler, and that's always worked out really well for me. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to say the home team's going to win both of those games. So New England will win on the Friday night and then Rochester on Saturday. Vancouver, Buffalo, yeah, I'm with you guys. Vancouver plays better away from Vancouver, it seems, but Buffalo's an awful long way off, and they've got Dane Smith. So it's kind of hard to bet against the Bandits at this point. Calgary, Georgia. I'm going to go with Calgary on this one. Though I'm looking forward to watching that. I'm hoping that that's available. Actually, I just had the schedule up here. Rochester, Georgia that's the wrong week. Sorry. Calgary, Georgia is oh goody. It's at the same time as Saskatchewan's in Toronto, so I won't be able to watch it anyway. And it's on Fox Sports Go, so there's no replay. So I guess I won't be watching that one, but I'm gonna pick Calgary in that one anyway. Saskatchewan and Toronto are also playing a home and home, which is weird considering these are two cities that are 2,000 or 3,000 miles apart. So I guess it's the same for both teams. They both have to play a game Friday night and then travel and play a game Saturday night. So I'm going to do the same thing again and go with the home team in both. Toronto will win in Toronto, and then the Rush will win in Saskatchewan. And the last game is Calgary and Colorado, and I got this one wrong this week when I went with Colorado, but I'm going to go with the Mammoth again this week. They are at home, and yeah, I think they can pull that one off. And yeah, so I guess that's it for our predictions this week. There's a whole pile of them. Yeah, if you guys have anything else you want to talk about, then that will be it.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have lots to talk about next week. It's crazy to see what 3 barn to barns next week and just a back to back. I mean, that's a lot of games next weekend, especially when you look at how few we had this weekend. So I think next weekend is gonna be unpredictable, and it's gonna be fun to talk about because I have a feeling we're gonna start seeing things break apart for the playoffs. So we're gonna have some new things to discuss.
Yeah, the Mammoth could have clinched a playoff spot already if the cards had fallen right for them with a win. So yeah, we're getting that point of the season already.
And the NLL trade deadline is coming up. I think it's middle of next week. So we've got another week and a half or thereabouts until the trade deadline. So if trades are going to be happening, they're going to be happening soon. So we may even have some of those to talk about next week. So other than that, this has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.